things are bad and we're sitting around bitching and complaining, or things are frustrating, just get in there and fix it. I always say, like, companies don't have toes. So if anyone at my company or anyone at any company is worried about stepping on people's toes, then you're worried about the wrong things, because the company doesn't have toes. So they just do whatever it is to make the company successful. Property management is a really difficult industry, and I'm sure you guys know this well from your customers and from the guests you've had here. I mean, we're talking like 15 to 20% margins on a good day. It's extremely HR intensive. The risk is insane, and trying to do all of that in an extremely decentralized environment is really tough.
Okay, we are here with Kerri Davis. Kerri, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, David and Reed. Thank you guys so much for having me here. So I am obviously Kerri Davis. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Fortress OS. And you and I met, David, while I was actually presenting on a panel at an IMN in Denver. And I would like to say the reason I actually include that is because in introducing myself, I think one of the most important things to say about me is I'm a little bit of a troublemaker, and I can be, as you called it, a little contrarian as a human. So, and I think that is actually really emphasized in my background. I'm a bit of maybe a jack of all trades, maybe a master of none, but I'm actually an accountant. I'm an attorney. I have worked in real estate for the past 13 years, started with a company called Elmington, based in Nashville, that I was actually their first full-time employee. It was just the four founding partners, and I was their first full-time team member as we took over management of an 600-unit asset in Louisville, Kentucky, and started our own property management company. And then fast forward 2 years into my time with them, and we were now a 5,000-unit property management company. We had grown organically to about 2,000 units, then acquired a small property management company. And my business partners eventually came to me and asked me if I would take over the leadership of that company and help us strategize on growing it and making it successful. And so I spent the next 5 years doing that while building Fortress, which is the core operating software that I run today. So.
Great job on your own background.
Yeah.
Also, what Trevor gave us in setup is that some of your leadership philosophy is grit and passion, radical candor, and know when to grind and when to breathe.
Yeah.
But specifically with radical candor, he said that you believe in the concept of front stabbing.
Yeah.
So is there going to be any front stabbing on this episode, or will we not? Is that the point we shouldn't know?
I hope so. Well, you'll definitely know if it happens, right? That's the whole concept of front stabbing.
Okay.
I think, yes, he probably found that on our website. And it is something that we talk about a lot. I think, I've worked in so many different companies, and I tend to really lean in to like very open and honest and direct conversations. But I've come to notice that not everyone can do that. Quite frankly, the majority of people don't do that. It doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're super high up in leadership or really, worker bee on the ground getting the job done. It doesn't really matter. Like the majority of people struggle with that sort of direct conversation. And so we introduced the concept of front stabbing specifically to really recognize that it's not easy, and we actually try to emphasize the fact that it's just as hard for the person giving it as it is for the person receiving it. And we think that the more that you would lean into it and the more you say the words front stabbing, in fact, if you're going to sit down and have a difficult conversation, just say it, just sit down and say, this is going to be comfortable for you or me. We're about to have some front stabbing. So I promise if I do it, you'll know it. And it would be very entertaining if we had the opportunity to do that.
Is it fair assumption to say that Fortress does not have an HR department yet?
Fortress does have an HR department.
Oh, okay. All right. I was just wondering how the front stabbing landed with HR.
So actually front stabbing came from my time at Elmington Property Management. Actually, it was one of our core values early on. And I fought really hard for it, really, really hard for it. Actually, I got a lot of pushback on it. But at the end of the day, our team loved it. Although we did run into an issue once where we actually had a managers conference and we gave out these really cool like bags for people that said front stabbing on them and had like a picture of a knife. People were like taking them home through the airport. That was fun. But other than that, no, we do have an HR department. I'm sure it wouldn't shock you to say that, to hear that I fight with them on some of our issues and concepts quite a bit. I'm pretty open about that, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for some of
Yeah.
those meetings between you and HR. But I am desperately wanting to borrow this, so that'll be my first point of action after this podcast. Is I'm going straight over to Courtney's desk, and I'm going to say it's time for us to integrate front stabbing into the digital culture. I love it, and I hope I don't know if I should stop with the front stabbing, but as David was asking, or should we be prepared for that? But I am going to say this, and it is strictly meant as a compliment. But I don't know how you've achieved everything that you have. Uh, at least given you look like you're in your mid-20s. For anybody that's going to watch this on YouTube or whatever, so it blows my mind everything that you've done. And do you attribute that to just a incredible kind of thirst and curiosity for life and different adventures, or has it been more kind of I guess intentional? You know, you mentioned accountant, attorney, and were we right that you have also some military
Yeah. Yes, you
and
were.
now an entrepreneur? So
Yeah.
I don't know even where to dive into that, but just yeah, how have you been able to achieve all this stuff in what I have to imagine is a relatively short amount of time? Are you
Well,
just doing like 3 things at the are you like a big multitasker or
no, I would actually say I'm not the best multitasker, but I actually have to address your first thing. So if I look like I'm in my mid-20s right now on this podcast, StreamYard is fantastic. Whatever filters you guys have going on are absolutely amazing. So I'm just gonna throw a shout out there. But no, I actually turned 40 this year, and I'm actually proud of that. So I don't have any issues with it. And I would say that I all my life I've been extremely adventurous. So last year my team actually, my executive team competed together in a Tough Mudder course in Nashville, and we did like the full 15K, like the biggest one, and had a blast doing it. So yes, I'm definitely extremely adventurous. And so when I graduated high school and went into accounting, I'm very analytical in that way. So I thought accounting would be a great step before I went to law school, which I really wanted to join the military while I was in law school. I really my goal at the time was to become a JAG officer and kind of travel the world and work in international affairs. That's what I really wanted to do. And a part of that stemmed from actually my husband, who he and I have been together since junior high, actually, had joined the
wow.
Army. Yes, had joined the Army straight out of high school. And so he had served in Iraq and then eventually went to work for a Department of Defense contractor. And then a Department of State contractor. So anyway, he was already traveling and while I was in law school. So while I was in law school, I joined the military. I actually contracted in, but unfortunately, my second summer with them, my first summer I spent actually working in the office of the staff judge advocate in Fort Sill. And then my second summer, I actually went to Fort Knox for like an officer training camp. And unfortunately, I broke both of my feet while I was in training
Oof.
over an 8-week period. Yeah. And I am I can be a bit stubborn, a bit pig-headed from time to time. So I went to the hospital, found out they said they thought my arches were falling. They didn't actually x-ray my foot. And so, and I had to go to the hospital for something else. So if I went back, like my foot was killing me and I knew something more than arches. But I was like, if I go back to the hospital, I'm going to fail the training. So I had to find a way to just like, push through it. Well, I shouldn't have because at the end of those 8 weeks, I'd shattered my third metatarsal in my foot. And so after about a year of physical therapy, I wasn't able to get that foot back into a place where I could carry a lot of weight without it re-breaking, which is what led to me actually receiving a medical release from the Army. But I was fortunate enough at the time when my husband was still working for a Department of State contractor overseas, and the company that he was working for was looking for like a business manager, like handling logistics and accounting and finance and HR. And so, having all my security clearances and all that, they hired me. So I went and worked in Iraq in the Green Zone with my husband for a year. I joke it was like the first year of our marriage, and we were living together in a Connex box, which was a very interesting experience. But it helped that we had been together since junior high. But yeah, and I would say that I love the adventure, but I'm also a bit of a troublemaker. So I think that a lot of times, like my progression of where I've been and where I got to where I am today is really just from always wanting to find a better way to do things. Like if things are bad and we're sitting around bitching and complaining or things are frustrating, like then just get in there and fix it. Like I always say, like, companies don't have toes. So, like, don't, if anyone at my company or anyone at any company is worried about stepping on people's toes, then you're worried about the wrong things, because the company doesn't have toes. So, like, just do whatever it is to make the company successful.
I was just getting over my underachieving complex, David. And then we decided to have Kerri on the podcast.
Yeah.
So thank you for that story. I'm going to go back to therapy now.
Do you want me to
No,
break both your feet and then you could go achieve something new?
there's other things I think we could do to help. I'd like
Okay.
to try first before we
I
move to
I got the
the
takeaway
feet.
incorrect. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's super cool, and I think
Hey.
we're grateful. I feel like I can already say that you're in this industry. I you can't even say we need more people like you, because I think you're one of one. But I'm really excited to hear now about the company, the vision, the problems you're trying to solve, etc. But David, I don't know if you want to react to that thread
Yeah,
that
well,
she
I was
just
gonna
laid
ask
down.
one last thing, since we already
Yeah.
mentioned it, because I wanted to get to it later. But the when to grind and when to breathe. Could you, just walk us through how you think about that and how that is reflected at Fortress?
Yeah. Interestingly, David, you and I actually chatted about this a little bit when we discussed Daniel Pink's book Drive. And, I think that it is, look, I know I'm probably going to catch a lot of slack for this. I actually still catch it with my team. We were actually at an engineering retreat about a month ago, and I was having this argument over a glass of wine with several of my team members, my engineering team members, about what actually motivates people. And I don't think it's money. Like, I don't think money motivates people, but I do think that if you can find what motivates people, that you can have that you can find that person who is also a little self-motivated, driven, really passionate, and is interested in whatever it is that you're asking them to do, that one person, you add knowing how to motivate them to the mix, and they can perform the work of 4 to 10 people easily. And so I'm just a firm believer in, if you can do that, and then you put a team of those people together, and then they all show up, right? So everyone is there giving 100%, motivated, passionate, driven, doing all the right things, that that amount of intensity and what I would say, like, deep work can create something that's just invaluable. And but then at the same time, you have to be really cognizant of giving those people the time off and the space to breathe in order for them to continue to be motivated by you. I mean, I'm fascinated by leaders like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. And if you haven't read Elon Musk's biography yet, it's absolutely brilliant. So I highly recommend it. But he was notorious for burning through insanely brilliant people, because they can't continue to be motivated by him. It's an intense motivation while it lasts, but they can't continue. And so I want team members who are with me, who know how Fortress works, who know how to make my clients happy for decades, not just a few years. And so I think you have to give them that space. So you have to know when to grind through it, when to really focus and put on the deep work hat, and then also giving people the space to breathe. I'm actually a huge practitioner of meditation. I meditate for 20 minutes every single day, and if I miss a day, I know it. And I'm a really firm believer in finding that space to breathe and to let the dust settle, so that you can be successful. So I always encourage the same in my team.
So do you do you think it is more than on the individual level, or does the organization go through kind of like a season of grind and then a season of not, I mean, not complete rest, but just more relaxed, or just, is there any way that you actually try to formalize it or
Yeah.
take advantage there, or is it more individually?
Yeah, great question. And I would actually say both. So, on an individual level, we encourage vacation time. We have unlimited PTO. In fact, two of my best team members one actually just left and one just came back from a like 2 week trips overseas. Like, we want them to really take advantage of that time off, and we try to set the stage for them so that they feel super comfortable doing it. That doesn't mean completely detaching from work like that. I'm not necessarily saying that, like, my best leaders can go away for 2 weeks and not ever have to look at their Slack. I don't know that if that's realistic. It's certainly not, maybe not in a startup, but that they can feel good walking away and knowing that we support them in that, and that we want them to enjoy themselves and have a really great experience. um, and encouraging things like meditation. Like we were in that engineering retreat. I led a group meditation for the team. So those sorts of things on an individual level. And then, from a group perspective, we also do things like take 14 days off during the winter holidays. So, like, we take 2 full weeks off during the Christmas kind of New Year's time frame, and we take more extended holidays. So over the Labor Day weekend, we don't just have one day off; we get 3 days off. Like those sorts of things that we're just trying really hard to be cognizant of the fact that at a startup, it's mostly grind. So we have to take the time intentionally to encourage our team members individually to breathe, and as a company also breathe.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we're
I
almost
have
15
I have
minutes. Oh, yeah, go
I
ahead.
know I'm slowing us down. I'm sorry, but I have to know, how did the engineers do with the meditation? Because you mentioned yourself being
Yeah.
a bit of an analytical brain, and
Yeah.
I don't think engineers are necessarily associated with meditation. Um, so yeah, was that a how did that go?
This is such a great question, Reed, and I appreciate you asking it. But now I feel like I'm gonna pat myself on the back for a second, but only because it is so funny that you asked it, because I knew that going into it, right? And I actually there's a few members of my team that I can have like pretty intense, like, philosophical conversations with, who meditate themselves, who read some really interesting books. In fact, I just had one recommend I can't remember, Frederick's The Levels of Energy, which I just read, which was crazy. And anyway, so I have a few members of the team, but then I know that there are others that I cannot imagine them sitting alone in silence for 2 minutes. So what I did was very, very intentional. I actually told them about the science of meditation for about 10 minutes before we actually went into the meditation. So I was actually able to provide them with like the data around how meditation actually changes the size and shape of your brain and the impact, and like your ability to anyway. So I had all these like data points to give them before I forced them into the meditation. So I think it was helpful.
Super smart
Yeah.
move, very smart.
Yeah.
And there was one other quick one that I wanted to ask, because I'm a big fan of Daniel Pink's as well, Book
Yeah.
Drive. You mentioned, and I think Jim Collins has said this too, but just money doesn't motivate at least typically the right people. I know that's a generalization, and it's not meant to
Mhm.
cast any stones at somebody that's a little bit more motivated by money or status and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, do you agree that money can demotivate people, and so it's just the inverse, and you kind of almost the contradiction that lies there, or well, I'll stop there. But yeah, from your perspective, if you're saying money doesn't necessarily motivate at least the right people, then can it demotivate them?
Yeah, I mean, in his book, Daniel Pink describes very specific circumstances in which money is demotivating. So, especially in philanthropic areas, right, where they would, he had some case studies around. Now, it's been a while since I've read the book, so please correct me if I'm front stab me if I'm saying anything incorrect. But he, talked about studies that had been done around like giving blood, and that if you offered people money to give blood, that less people actually did it, versus actually explaining to them like why, what you need the blood for, and who it was going to help, and a lot more people actually showed up. So I do actually think that money can belittle things for people. So I don't think you can put a price point on everything. But in terms of work, I mean, I think today, in a lot of ways, money is seen as the reward for doing a good job, and so it generally does have a good feeling with it, in terms of being able to give people bonuses, those sorts of things. But I do think you have to be intentional with it. So yeah, yeah,
It's tricky, and I love that you caught what I was saying, because I didn't mean if you underpay somebody, can they
yeah,
still remain motivated? I was asking more what the use case you were talking about, where
yeah,
the blood bank. So thank you for that.
yeah,
Super interesting topic that could definitely be a
yes,
tangent in its own. So,
yes,
David, I'll let you get us back on track, and start getting into Fortress.
Well, yeah, just give us the elevator pitch. Like what, where did the idea for Fortress come around, and then, what has it evolved into?
Yeah. So when I stepped into that 5,000 unit property management company and tried to figure out how the heck to get it back on the rails, because it was struggling. It was hard. But I mean, to be clear, property management is a really difficult industry, and I'm sure you guys know this well from your customers and from the guests you've had here. I mean, we're talking like 15 to 20% margins on a good day. It's extremely HR intensive. The risk is insane, and trying to do all of that in an extremely decentralized environment is really tough. So when I dug in and realized that we had a little bit of work to do, I really focused on two things. First and foremost, the people. I had to get the right people in the right spots, and I had to get the wrong people out of there as quickly as possible. And so that's what I focused on at first. And then I started digging into the tools that I was providing with them to be successful. And after a few months of really kind of breathing down the necks of my community managers and leasing consultants to get the data into the system and to make it so that I could look at the reports and see what was happening, even though the reports were pretty terrible, I finally scheduled a meeting with one of my leasing consultants, and I said, "That's it. Like, take me through a move-in from from a prospect to a move-in in an affordable unit in the software that we were using at the time, which was RealPage." And I stopped counting at like 300 clicks. It's like, well, what the heck is happening here? Like, this is insanity. Like, of course you're not freaking putting the data. Like, it takes you an hour to process a prospect through. Like, of course you're not taking the time to put in all the rest of the data and all your prospects. So after realizing that, I was like, well, there has to be a better solution in the market. And I did not think that I needed to build one at the time. So I went and researched the market really heavily. I mean, I dug into Resman and Appfolio and MRI, and for numerous reasons, none of the three of those would have worked for us. So I also looked at Entrata and Yardi, and we ended up rolling out and using both Entrata and Yardi. I had a lot of frustrations with both of them, with all three of them actually, that I just couldn't reconcile, that I couldn't make work. And so I took a business plan to my partners and I was like, we need to build our own core software. Like, if we're going to be a really phenomenal property management company, we need our own engine. And here's why. And one of the first things that I focused on, and why I really, really knew I needed to build my own software, is that none of those other solutions were built with affordable as a core component of their architecture. And when I say affordable, I mean big A affordable. So LIHTC, HUD, Home, RD, we were managing about 70% of our units then, and I think close to 50, 60% of our units today are affordable. So we needed a solution that really understood affordable and that worked really well for it. And none of those other systems were built affordable first. They were all separate modules, separate databases, even just completely separate architectures. And it created a lot of duplicative and time-consuming work for my teams. So that was number one on my list. And then number two for us was I wanted a super robust accounting system, which actually led me to realizing I wanted the option to have any super robust external system. I didn't want to be tied into this kind of one size fits all, like, we do everything for you. Like, this is everything that you would need. And if you want any of those other point solutions, well, like, you can use them, but let's be clear, the integrations are kind of shitty and we're going to charge them through the nose for it. So like, I really thought we need to fix this. Like, that is not the way most other industries operate. I think a really great example is like Salesforce. Salesforce is your CRM, and that's fantastic. And they do a phenomenal job with that. They're not your accounting system. Like, they're not your HRIS. They're not trying to be everything. They instead have really solid integrations with all those other solutions. But I mean, just looking at property management software today, they all have backend, what they call their backend bespoke accounting systems, rather than integrating with the phenomenal accounting ERPs that already exist in the market that 90% of companies in the US are using today, whether that's like Sage Intacct or Oracle's NetSuite or JD Edwards. It's like, why in the world are we reinventing the wheel with, in my opinion, very unsophisticated accounting software that's bolted into the back end? They're trying to be everything rather than just doing one thing really well. So we realized we wanted to be the hub. We want to be the core operating system, the way that Salesforce is in many ways, that core operating kind of front end point of sale machine for a lot of companies. And then we just wanted to integrate with all the other solutions to package it up. And then finally, data. We just really wanted the ability to access and use our data as our data, and we wanted to be able to give other clients that access to, for them to have their own data. So that's why we built Fortress.
And so now Fortress is, I think operating system was the key part there that you had explained to me, is it's a property management operating system. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And is there anybody else that you know of that you would see doing the same thing?
there's no other core operating system that I know of that integrates with like the Sage Intacct and the NetSuites and the JD Edwards of the world. So I don't know. I mean, I think we're looking at it a lot differently than others. Again, we're the only core operating system that was built affordable first. Like the first units on Fortress were affordable. In that's used to work for large scale property management companies. I will say, like the caveat here being that there are quite a few new players in the market that are focused on like a single family side and mostly disparate site. And in my opinion, that's a very different operating model. I wouldn't sell Fortress for those. Like we rent for like, the 10 plus units per building. We really only look at groups that are about 1,000 units plus of operating. But I do think there's a lot of really great contenders coming up in that single family disparate site space.
Okay. And then what would the tech stack then for a typical client look like once you add Fortress into the mix?
Yeah. Well, Fortress is really a rip and replace today. So we're pulling out, or we're going in when customers are pulling, Yardi or RealPage or Entrata out of their core tech stack. And we're coming in and usually it's us and Sage Intacct, which is I would argue the best accounting ERP in the United States today. It's actually the only one endorsed by the American Institute of CPAs. And at the very least, it's extremely focused on both real estate and nonprofit, which a lot of our real estate companies and partners have those sort of arms. So it makes a lot of sense. So we're generally selling Fortress, Sage Intacct, TransUnion for credit and criminal screening. A lot of times we'll bring in solutions like Nexus for the procurement side of the house. So we really see this as like a three-pronged solution, right? You have your income, your point of sale solution, which is Fortress. That's what we're managing. Then you have your expenses, which is usually some form of a procurement platform with your like website catalogs where you can like link out to Staples and place an order, HD Supply and place an order, and then it manages all your purchase orders and your approval workflows. And then sitting in the middle of those two is your accounting system, which is managing all of your bank reconciliations and your financial statement prep. And that's how most large companies in the U.S. today operate. Property management not fitting in that bucket.
Okay. And then as far as when you had talked about the prospect being 300 clicks to get them through,
Yeah.
does Fortress then replace that aspect of it, almost the CRM version?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Fortress is now like the rent roll management solution. So we're managing everything from your leads, your prospects, your applicants, your actual residents where, you can text your residents, you can manage their work orders, all the way through to managing them through the move out and the final account statement and inspection, all of that. We manage that entire life cycle of the resident.
Got it. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
All right, Reed, where do you want to go?
Well, I'm trying to settle a little bit with this. So I'm going to ask Kerri for you to just unpack this a little bit more as far as kind of the distinction between, where you started was we didn't want to be the Swiss Army knife or try to handle everything, and that, and I couldn't agree more. That usually doesn't go well. And but also not sounding like, you're looking to be a point, one of these point systems. So I got the part of like, we're trying to be a little bit more like Salesforce and the platform that you kind of build around or integrate with.
Yep.
But then you mentioned several things that Fortress does that I think competes, and I'm not saying that you said you don't, but with point systems, and therefore, meaning like the accounting. Sorry, you just reeled off some things, but
Sorry.
that there are point solutions, and so that's what I'm trying to settle with. Is it feels like I can see the operating system, but it also seems like there are elements of what you've built that are competing with point solutions. So yeah, if you could just draw maybe a bigger or a clear distinction for me on that front, and then is it the affordable part really caught my ear. Like, why does that not exist? So it sounds like it's a huge opportunity for the industry, and it's exciting that Fortress seems to be focused on that. But you stop short of saying, this is what I typically do. I ask 7 questions in one, but that affordable you didn't put in front of being that core operating system. So maybe start right there. Are you building an affordable operating system, or are you building an operating system for property management at large? So
Yeah.
first question. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, it's okay. I'm getting used to your 7 questions in one. You're
Yeah, you clearly are keeping up.
challenging
Yeah.
it. In terms of what we built, so Fortress is at its core affordable. Every aspect of any affordable program is included in the core architecture of every household in Fortress. But the unique component of Fortress is that you have the ability to just flip a switch to turn that unit on or off as affordable. So whether that's the whole property is conventional and then all of your units are not affordable, so you just turn the switch off, or whether it's because you have an affordable property that is actually going through its process of being removed from the tax from the LIHTC program, and you can start actually just shutting down units one at a time or households one at a time from being affordable to now being conventional. It's just a flag versus the other our competitors, generally speaking, have completely separate databases for affordable, which means that when you have an affordable household, every household member now has 2 first names, 2 last names, 2 phone numbers, 2 social security numbers. Everything about them is duplicative because it is literally a separate database for the affordable component of that household. And so Fortress didn't having it as a part of our core really sets us apart from a data perspective and from a UI interface and the simplicity of the processes and the workflows. So we did focus on affordable, but by the nature of our of how we built the architecture, it can be used by any property management company. Now, I will tell you, we really tend to only work with groups that have affordable, but 90% of the groups that manage affordable also manage some form of conventional. It's very rare today to find groups that all they do is affordable, very similar to like student housing or those sorts of things. So
Let me just for my own curiosity, why would they have set up different databases for affordable? Like, what's that different for? Like, why you need to partition it?
yeah, so I can actually speak to Fortress. I can't really speak to the other to our competitors necessarily, but I can just say that, you know, being a core ERP is huge. In fact, I think in Fortress today we have over like 600 tables or something that we manage today, right? So if you think back to like Yardi and RealPage and Artrada, you think back to when they started, right? They were building all these tables for conventional and constantly adding on, and so there's tons of data and tables being stored. And at some point, especially with the older technology, and managing all this on your own servers and how databases were structured, they would have to at some point, right? They would say, okay, well, this is like full, and now we're trying to add in, thousands of more data points per household member, right? Because now you've got all this additional data for a household year over year over year. You have to report on granular data points that are allocated to their income and their assets in order to determine whether or not they qualify for the regulated unit in those prices. And so now they're like, okay, well, we can't fit it all in here. Like, we just need to create a whole separate system to manage this and to create all your state reporting and integrate with HUD tracks and Mink and all of those things. So I mean, that would be my assumption. So I mean, I think it's just a matter of time and the matter of like sophistication of tech at the time that they were building these platforms decades ago. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it sounds super plausible, and that makes sense to me. It sounds like there's way more reporting requirements on affordable than
Mhm.
conventional, and maybe they didn't think it was needed to have the same requirements for like a standard household when the things first got stood up. So makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to try to merge the other six into one. But that distinction between the operating system and the point solutions, um, yeah, could you? I'm trying to think of the right way of asking this, but
Yeah.
would you say you're trying? David's heard this expression from me before. Be more of like this universal adapter, that anybody can plug into, and ultimately that will lend to like the kind of the dream like operating system or experience, or is there a core competency? I still think when I think Salesforce, and probably because I'm old, but CRM, and then I think about all the things that are built on top of it, but
Yeah.
you did mention point of sale, but I'm just wondering, is there kind of a core competency or element of your software, your tech, similar to Salesforce, or would you say, no, we are really agnostic, even though we do solve for things that other point solutions do?
Yeah, I would say that we actually are very agnostic, even though we solve for a few of the other solutions that other solutions do. But here's what I would say with that. So yes, when you were asking me, when I was describing earlier what Fortress is, right? We're not your procurement platform. We're not your accounting platform. We're not going to create your financials. We're not going to process your invoices or your bills that need to be paid to HD or Sherwin-Williams. We're not doing any of that. I would actually argue that we are the CRM. Like we are the customer relationship management solution. So we're managing your rent roll, which is your residence. We're managing the asset, the pricing, all of that. That is the point of sale. That's the customer solution. So I think the analogy to Salesforce is pretty. I mean, obviously, Salesforce is one of the most successful companies in the world. I'm not necessarily pitting myself up against them as a startup, but I do think that the analogy is fairly suited today. But I will say though that we are capable of doing things like, for example, we have an integration with HubSpot. So if you wanted to use HubSpot for all of your lead management in multifamily, you can use HubSpot for lead management. And then you actually tell us when you want to send that lead into Fortress. Now, Fortress could also manage your leads. Like you can send in your leads from apartments.com into Fortress, or you could have them sent into HubSpot, manage them in HubSpot, and funnel them into Fortress when you're actually ready for them to be screened in TransUnion and become a resident and move in. Same with a group like Funnel. If you want to use Funnel for your lead management, fantastic. Funnel will manage all the leads for you. And then when Funnel is ready to send them to Fortress and applicant, they can send them in, and we can let Funnel be the source of truth for that lead. Like we're really open to how it works. And I would say, I don't know if you guys use or have used HubSpot, but very similarly, like we're hoping to eventually have that kind of integration marketplace in Fortress, where there's a page in Fortress where you can just go turn on Hunter Warfield, turn on TransUnion, turn on HubSpot, whatever it is that you want, and just use those feeds. So that's our goal.
Well, it sounds inspiring and exhausting at the same time. And and the inspiring part hopefully is obvious, but I think it is a huge opportunity and let's say problem within the industry that we've heard before on this podcast. We've talked to others that have certainly given their spin or perspective on it. The exhausting part is keeping up with all of that, right? So that's I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest challenges even for Salesforce is making sure that they can integrate and function with all the new tech that is emerging. How do you guys go about that as far as I'll say maybe focus on the prioritization? So knowing that we're getting flooded right now, this industry, real estate, I'll just say broadly, is getting flooded with all sorts of new tech. How do you guys determine, which, I guess, sprint or supplier or technology you're going
Yeah.
to focus on?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And it's one we struggle with. It's funny that you said that Salesforce today is struggling to keep up with all the integrations that it needs, but especially all the new tech that's coming out. What's really interesting is that we actually have to combat the inverse of that, which is that most of the groups that we want to integrate with, most of the point solutions we want to integrate with, and that want to integrate with us, have already built almost immediately outdated integrations to like RealPage already, because their APIs are outdated or old, right? And there's no getting around. I mean, these have been around for decades. So they're not using like the latest technology, things like webhooks and like bidirectional and like sharing of the source of truth, those sorts of, like they're not doing that. So like when we come into the picture and we're like, okay, great, let's build this integration and here's how we'd like to do it, they're like, oh, well, we don't have those things yet because they haven't built them because no one else can use them. So but the awesome part is that most of these point solutions are capable of doing those things really quickly because their tech stacks are very modern, and utilizing sophisticated solutions, and we're all housed on AWS these days and those sorts of things, so it does make it a lot easier at the end of the day. But in terms of prioritizing, we really look for the groups that are like best in class for what they're doing and willing to dedicate the resources to be flexible in building that ideal integration, not the old school integration for us. So a really great example of that is our decision to make Hunter Warfield our preferred collections partner. So they have the integration that we have with them is really deep. It actually is embedded into almost like a pizza tracker for collections inside of Fortress, where we're in real time, you sharing updates on those prior resident collection statuses and those sorts of things. And we did that because Hunter Warfield was willing to do it with us. We met with a lot of the big collections companies in the industry. They were willing to commit to us on that and provide a really awesome experience for our mutual clients. And so we move forward with them. And a lot of times we'll kind of take steps like baby steps at first. So we'll meet with groups and we'll be like, okay, what's the quickest way that we could just start working together? And in doing that, we learn a lot about them as a company, like how flexible they are, what their data looks like, those sorts of things. Even if we're just essentially sharing data files for it on some sort of cadence in order to meet the requirements of the data sharing between the two systems, we just learn a lot, and then we decide who we move forward with and who we essentially back when we are out there selling, and our customer says, okay, this all looks awesome, but we really like a solution that does this. And we're like, oh, well, we have a solution for that. That's prop up, that's Hunter Warfield, that's this. And so it works really well for us.
No, that's great. I think, it sounds a little more like the build it, if we build it, they will come versus, the other way around, which is
Yeah.
all of our customers are really dictating, like who's being the squeaky wheel or, who has the deepest pockets driving our roadmap, which I think's awesome. Not everybody has that luxury. We didn't ask up front whether you're bootstrapped or funded, but now I think I know the answer to that because you're going to need a little runway.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to skip past Fortress, but I'm curious to get to the pricing conversation we were having. So let me maybe like seal something up and make sure Reed covers off any questions left on Fortress. But the biggest challenge in so far is something that I'm wondering about. As Reed said, it sounds exhausting. So like if someone had come to me and say, "Hey, you should build this," I'd be like, "I don't know if I have it in me." So biggest challenge would be good, and then like sort of the current biggest headwind or objection, or just what you're facing right now.
Yeah. So biggest challenge is absolutely the laggard industry and the very slow to make decision kind of contacts that we're working with. So I would say, I cannot tell you how many times a month I hear this saying and I fucking hate it. Like no one got fired for picking Yardy, even though everybody hates it afterwards. No one was ever fired for picking it. So, I mean, we absolutely face that. There's a lot of groups that are super skeptical when they first hear about us and we are sharing what we're doing. And there's no way you've built a solution that competes with those industry giants. And then they see it and they're like, oh, wow, you actually did. And then they want to dig in and find out, every teeny tiny answer to make, or they want to bring every teeny tiny question to get every answer to make sure that there's nothing that we're missing. And so it can be really exhausting, but it's also really rewarding on the back end when we eventually close it. And yes, it's a grind, that's for sure. And David, to your point, honestly, I feel like this is one of those situations where it's like ignorance is like so great in so many ways. When I first started building Fortress, man, if I had known then what I know now, I never would have built it. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like there was probably a 2-year period where I should have been committed to a padded cell. I mean, like there were days, like full vulnerability and honesty here. There were days where I would walk into my biggest investor, which we are mostly bootstrapped, actually, Reed.
All right.
Yes, but my biggest investor, Kerri Rosenblum, who it was really my partner in this from day one. There are days where I would just walk into his office and lay down on his couch, and I would just cry for like 20 minutes. And I was like, that's it. Okay, I got it out. Now I just got to go back at it again. And I mean, my team and I, when we were first getting Fortress up and running, we were working like 7 days a week for months on end, making sure that we had Fortress up and running in time so that we didn't have to sign another annual renewal contract with one of those legacy players, so that we could get Fortress up and running and get the revenue coming into Fortress. So it was insanely intense. But now I look back on it and I'm really glad I was ignorant because now we're super happy. So
Have you
And
seen?
so
Oh, go ahead.
well, no, you got to get your joke in. Let's
Well,
hear
no,
it.
it's not a joke. You're usually the one with the bad. Well, some of your jokes are bad. Some of your jokes are just daily. He brings more of that quirky humor to the podcast. I'm more here for movie references and moral support. But have you seen Broadcast News, Kerri, by any
no,
chance? It's
I
an
haven't.
it's an 80s flick. You've seen it, right, David?
Yeah, you turned me on to it.
Yeah. What would you say, scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, it's very good. Well, although I don't know if I've watched it twice, but it's very impactful.
Yeah, and it's written by Albert Brooks, who, again, I'm dating myself, but pretty iconic comedian in the 80s. You're gonna have to watch it, Kerri, even if you
Okay.
don't like movies. And Holly Hunter plays the lead. It's about broadcast media. and she does exactly what you described. Things get super stressful. She just has to unload. She'll
Yeah.
close the door though. She doesn't always have somebody in the room, and she just bursts out in tears for 20 minutes. Then she comes out. She's like,
Yeah.
"I'm good. Let's go." So you just, yeah, hit me with that. My last question, since you said you wanted to seal this up, is how you set expectations. I ask this question a lot on this podcast, but as a new supplier, especially trying
Mhm.
to, I won't say boil the ocean, but definitely tackle a very big problem,
Yeah.
the magnitude of it. How do you go about that? Are you talking to owners, kind of long term, short term, and then NOI versus the whole time savings and et cetera? I mean, I won't fill it in anymore for you, but yeah, just talk to us about how you go about bringing on new business.
Yeah. So I will say first and foremost, when it comes to setting expectations, you know, Elmington Property Management has run and scaled a really successful property management company that I ran until about 3 years ago, and I'm still a partner in that company. And they've been using Fortress for like 5 years now, and they've through that time, they've grown from 10,000 units to 35,000 units, and we have all sorts of, and it's 60 to 70% fee management. So we have all sorts of like institutional equity utilizing Fortress for their property operations and Sage Intacct for their financials, and things are going really, really well. So that company actually just hit NMHC's top 50 this past year. So, um, when I am setting expectations with a client, I obviously say like I don't have to like I Fortress speaks for itself. Like you can see that, and you can have access to our test environments. You can do whatever you want. It speaks for itself. But at the end of the day, we're not perfect. Like we're not. No software you use is going to be perfect. No software you use is going to solve all your problems. But we are going to be phenomenal partners to you because we've been there. We've all been there. We've all done it. The vast majority of my customer success and sales team has actually worked in property management. They understand that world. So they are here to truly support and partner with you to the point where we've actually had a few clients who a year, 2 years post utilizing Fortress have asked if they could invest money in Fortress. Like that's how much of a partnership they truly feel like we have. So like I'm not going to solve all your problems. I'm not going to be perfect. Fortress is not going to be perfect, but we are going to be true partners to you in this, especially in our beginning stages. So that's the first expectation that I set. And then the second one is that we are really, really good at affordable. Like that is who we are. And here are the things that we're really good at. And here's the ROI we provide. And there are data points around this. Like for example, our in-system training platform has reduced the number of tickets that go into corporate offices by about 50% for like tech needs, which has allowed most of our customers to, even as they've scaled, we've had some customers that have grown from 2,000 to 7,000 units with us. Even as they've scaled, they haven't had to hire any more IT team members to handle like those tickets that were coming in constantly from other systems. We have numbers around affordable applications, that used to take 20 to 30 days from an application to a move-in are now taking 7 to 10. So like we have all that data around our centralized compliance, but at the end of the day, it's about them, I think, feeling like their on-site teams and their specialized teams have the support to be successful. And so we're showing that to them, and we're providing that partnership with them. And then, at the end of the day, it does take a little bit of a risk. Like, we're not Yardi. So at the end of the day, there is a bit of a risk there, and we are asking them to take that jump with us. Um, and like I said, we have the case studies to back up the success for it. So that's what we're sharing.
No, I think that's
Were you,
great. And were you wondering
were
why?
you try were you trying to hit the clapper over there?
Well, no, it's it says batteries running low on
Oh,
on this laptop, and I trying to figure out with all these cords which one I need to plug in.
Oh no.
I think it's better for me to just call a friend here, meaning Lisa. Um, but that did help, and I appreciate you answering that pretty directly. And the risk that's I guess there is a level of risk, you could say, but I wasn't sure if you leaned more into like business outcomes,
Mm,
because and with affordable, maybe you need to be careful with that, right? Like this isn't an NOI like first,
Yeah.
platform.
Mm.
But you did mention rip and replace, and so maybe there's some immediate savings that these folks realize, by bringing on Fortress, versus all the different point solutions that stacks up in a hurry, right? As far as cost.
Yeah.
Um, but gosh darn it, there was something else. I got totally distracted with the chords. All right, if it comes back to me, I'll make sure to interrupt interrupt us again later.
All right, we had a quick technical stop break. We'll charge the laptop, but we're back now. So I think we sealed up everything on Fortress. Let's move on to Kerri. Like you and I, we started talking about hot takes when we were at the
Yeah.
conference, just contrarian thinking. And one of the things that it's funny, your colleague at the conference was like, "Oh, why don't you talk about pricing?" And so we had a quick conversation about pricing. But hit the audience and read with your thoughts on how the industry prices.
Oh, a lot of thoughts on this. Okay. So, you know, Fortress actually, going back a second to our point solution and whether or not what we do and don't do in Fortress. Fortress actually has a very kind of basic, I don't mean that to say it's not smart, but it's just built upon the very basic foundations of supply and demand curves, very basic machine learning algorithm that Fortress uses to create pricing recommendations for anyone who's looking for that sort of like basic pricing recommendation solution. Now, it's not a solution that I would say is used heavily. We don't charge much for it. It's not your LROs, it's not your yield stars or anything like that. That's not what we're building here, or AI RM or whatever it is. Um, that's not what we're doing. But I will say that the reason that we built it is because we think that there is like way too big of a gap today between how we are pricing our multifamily units. There's just far too big of a gap between Excel and the LROs of the world. There's too much there, and there's just a much easier solution in the middle that I would argue for. And that's fine. That's not really my point here. But what I will say that is in through building that and through having conversations with a lot of multifamily operators about whether or not they want to use Fortress's in-system algorithm or use an LRO or a REBA or something like that. Well, we found a lot of uh, interesting conversation around the fact that customers are adamant that they should be using their market comp data to create their own pricing. And I I am I'm a purist on the like economic scale, and I really believe in internal supply and demand curves when you're not selling a commodity, and which I would argue that housing, that multifamily housing is not a commodity. I would say that every apartment community is very different. We're not selling airline seats, we're not selling storage units. Like it, no one cares that much about where the storage unit is exactly, or what amenities it has, or even your airlines, right? Like I can tell you that, being based in Nashville, we are a Southwest hub. And so it's very hard for anyone who wants to maintain an allegiance with Delta or United or American to maintain that if you move to Nashville. Like if you move to Nashville, you're going to start using Southwest, because we have direct flights everywhere. But it's just a commodity. It's an airline seat. You don't care that much about it. When it comes to multifamily homes, I just do not see that correlation. And so I say that the so then I believe that every apartment community should truly have its own supply and demand curve that you're using to create pricing recommendations. And I do not think that utilizing the market comp data is conducive to that. So that's kind of my first point, is that like these homes that we're selling, I I mean, I would say that, if I'm going to go buy an apartment home or rent an apartment home, that I'm going to make that decision based on like two top factors for me. First and foremost, location, because of my children, because I have children. And then the second one is going to be, where do I feel comfortable? That's it. Like, where do I feel comfortable? It doesn't have to have a dog park. It doesn't have to have any of those things, but I just need to feel comfortable there. And so in that way, I think, homes are not airline seats. So I just think it's very hard for us to commoditize them in that way. The second is like utilizing your market comp data really is usurping the system, I would argue. So hear me out on this one. Your the machine learning algorithm is designed to learn as prices change in your own apartment community, as those prices change. It's designed to learn how that impacts the demand for those units, right? If your competitors are increasing their prices, then your demand curve is likely going to increase, and you can then likely increase your prices, right? So like you're learning from the machine's going to learn from what's happening in the market as those things are happening in the market. When you try to usurp it by saying, oh, well, my competitors are raising their prices, so even though this is what my supply and demand curve is recommending to me, I should still increase my prices more than that. You're artificially creating change that you don't know is necessarily going to trickle down into that demand. Instead, you should allow the demand to trickle down from the changes in the market, not try to usurp them. So, I see the same thing all the time with even other kind of silly points. It's like, oh, well, my pricing recommendation tool said that should increase rents $30, but there's also this like construction that's happening out front. And it's making it harder for prospects to get into my unit. And I'm like, if it's making it harder for prospects to get in, then the machine learning algorithm is actually going to start to decrease your prices because it sees that traffic has slowed. But like, you don't know that the construction out front is going to cause that. The construction out front could be because there's like a Nordstrom going in across the street, and now everyone wants to live at your property. So like, you don't make the assumptions. Allow the machine learning algorithm to actually like take the data that's being fed and then make the pricing adjustments from there. And then my third point on this, like even if you disagreed on the above, we still have this component that we're using right now, which is discounts. For the love of God, people do not want to get rid of their discounts. Like, well, just discounts are just a factor in my market. So everyone's giving away a month free. So we have to do something, or people aren't going to think that they're getting a deal. It doesn't matter if we lower rents, whatever, we have to do these discounts. So again, if you're doing the discounts, then you're a little bit like usurping the system anyway when you do that. But at the same time, like the machine learning algorithm is going to learn from that too. So it's going to learn from those adjustments. So if you feel like you need to make adjustments, throw it into your discount and the algorithm will adjust from there. So I just feel like we place way too much emphasis on what's happening in the broader market when we're not thinking about the fact that these apartment units are really not commodities, especially not today, when there's a lot of supply available and we're chasing after leases. Like, it's just not a commodity right now. Second, like, we shouldn't be telling the software what's going to happen. That's the inverse point of the software. Like, you let the software see what's happening and then it makes the adjustments. And then finally, like, again, we're still offering discounts, so we still have a lot of that manual flexibility in handling that. And of course, all this is really interesting in considering what's happening right now with the Department of Justice lawsuit. So.
Well, you said you gave out front stabbing bags. I would like to see some usurper like T-shirts or hats or something as one of your marketing campaigns coming up. Yeah, I like that. Well, your second point is the one that I thought was super interesting when we were talking before, because effectively what you and I were chatting about was pay more attention to the supply and demand for your own property
Yeah.
versus that of the market.
Yeah.
Because you talked about how if other people raised price just now, then should you or should you not, if your traffic isn't showing, you should raise price. But I also see the opposite happening, where rents have gone down in many markets over the last couple of years. But just because your comps are lowering their prices, does that mean you should start lowering your prices proactively? Yeah, exactly.
No,
So
absolutely not. Why would you do that? Like, it's
yeah.
ridiculous.
But that's what it can end up happening if you're using too much
Yeah.
comp data or market data to end up trying to influence your
Yeah.
pricing. Do you have any I don't know, stats or anything on how this has worked for you guys, whether it's at the management company or at Fortress? Because I think a lot of people would be like, well, why wouldn't you want to use all this market data?
Mhm.
And then they would think it's too dumbed down, for example. So do you have anything you could like throw out there to help combat that?
Well, not specifically. The stats that I have are really more around the generic obtaining a goal, right? Because a lot of the stats that people want to throw around are like, we were able to achieve X amount of net rental income increase or whatever that looks like. And in my opinion, well, first of all, over the past 2 years, to your point, we've seen a little bit of a, especially in some submarkets, we've seen
Uh,
some of the.
Sorry, I have to stop. I'm laughing because Reed just rejoined. He's turning red. He's,
This
he
is
changed his
entertaining.
name to Technical Genius.
Sorry,
Uh,
Kerri.
we had Kerri. I knew to break and laugh because Reed and I had another interview where we tried to hold it in when something like this happened, and it was like a 25-minute where we couldn't stop laughing, and then we never could. We actually never told Dom why we were laughing,
I love it.
and I just felt like it just ruined it for him. So, anyways, I had to just laugh it out. Reed, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
I
Welcome
think it's
back.
great. I think it supports the humor habit, right? You just laugh about it.
There you go.
Enjoy
Yeah,
it.
That's right.
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think that, it's hard to say what are the stats around success with revenue management, because for some groups the objective is occupancy, for others it's net rental income, like for others it's renewals, so you're not spending money on turns, like there's so many different objectives. So it's hard to say, like, to bring all those objectives together and then have a stat that's like, well, net rental income increased so much or occupancy increased so much, because that's not everyone's same goal. So that's a little difficult. But what I will say is that the more, like, I think there's so many decisions that are made out of fear rather than like confidence in the tools that you've chosen and the people that you're working with. So what I mean by that is, like, we lower prices. If we see our competitors lowering prices, we lower prices because we're afraid that our traffic is going to drop if we have higher prices. When the decision actually should be to trust in our team and our tech that we've put in place, to trust it, allow it to make those right decisions for us, and then a lot of times your pricing wouldn't decrease. So I think it's, I'm gonna be a little philosophical here, but I think we make too many decisions out of fear rather than out of like the trust and love and appreciation for the team and the people that we're working with. So yeah.
Well, Reed, I thought when you dropped off, I know you said you had a hot take to ask. So I got to Kerri's pricing, where she was saying basically pay more attention on to your own property supply and demand curve versus that of the market. But I'm not going to get to ask your hot take question now that you're back. So I'll toss it back to you.
Appreciate that. And I can't figure out how to straighten my hat now. Because of got thrown off in all that melee
Look
and
great, Reed. You look great.
yeah, a variety of things that have me kind of disjointed here. So sorry, Kerri. But mine was an observation slash question that I think could take us to a contrarian viewpoint. But I doubt you noticed this, David, and I'm not the one that normally notices small details. I don't think I saw the word artificial intelligence or AI on Fortress's entire homepage. And there's a good amount of content. So I scrolled through
Yeah.
all of them. And the question is, coincidental or not coincidental? And then the follow up is, David and I did an episode where he kind of went off about fish fraud. He was likening AI. He was like, you know, is it really AI, and does it even matter if it tastes the way you want it? I mean, that was his very shortcutting that session that we did. But yeah, first tell us, was that intentional or not? And then what's your kind of stance on AI in the industry? Is it just a buzzword? Is it something that we we should be more focused on and understanding whether it's true AI, et cetera? So I don't know if there's a contrarian take in there, but yeah, I'll let you answer.
How would you define the AI, Reed?
Well, I'm probably the worst person to ask that question.
That's
I
the technical
I
genius.
see it as a universe,
Yeah.
and I have not had any wine or any other substance altering enhancements here before this podcast. But we a few years ago, and we've referenced this before, we had a guy named Professor, and it is his true last name, Professor Beaver, who works at DU and leads like the computer science and the AI division. And he came to our summit a few years ago and said, AI includes spreadsheets. Like, he was trying to kind of get our attention, but he was like, there's classes of AI. And so some of the most basic rudimentary things and
Yeah.
calculations are in fact AI.
Yeah.
Then you can like go all the way up, I'll say, or down to neural networks. And
David has a more out of his pocket definition for AI than I do. But, you know, generally speaking, intelligence that, can learn and, develop on its own, right, independently, is, the more basic, I think, or accepted definition of what artificial intelligence is. I don't want to say I see it more complex than that, but, I think I'm getting over that definition and kind of thinking about it in a more layered way. Whenever I get into it with people, but, I don't come from that background, and so I don't want to
Yeah,
pretend here to have the answers to that. But yeah, I didn't let you answer first because you fired a question back at me. But
good.
is that a coincidence not to have AI on your homepage?
Yeah. So your definition actually coincides very, very closely with mine, which I would argue that we've been leveraging AI in spreadsheets for 30 years. So like I can't, I mean, I think like the first commercials for what Excel could do with predicting the sort of data that you were looking for by just like dragging your mouse across the screen was like 35 years ago or something like that. Like it's been around for a long time. Um, Look, it's a buzzword right now that I feel that we should intentionally exclude from our marketing materials unless we're doing something that is in in the sense that people are looking for it to be today. Like if we were leveraging some sort of a chat GPT inside of Fortress or which we are looking at doing, or if we were doing something like Funnel is doing with their AI bots and products. Look, if we were doing that, then I would absolutely be throwing it all over the place. But we're not. We are leveraging AI. Fortress uses AI in the back end all over the place. Like Fortress in and of itself is smart. It knows what next things need to happen, and it can create auto workflows, and it can create like notifications that are smart strategic notifications that are predictive. Like it has the machine learning algorithm for pricing. Like there are things inside of it, but I think using it, but I feel like that would be like Excel running around and saying that they have all this like brand new AI. That's not where we're going. Like we're doing the things that every tech company has been doing for decades that is enhancing the intelligence of our core technology, and that in and of itself for me is not something to run around like using a buzzword inappropriately. I mean, it's the same way like you know most of most of the solutions in the market today, tons of tech companies are saying they have open APIs. Well, the inference from that is something that isn't, in my opinion, isn't true. Like they're saying, oh, well, we have open APIs. Yes, we can integrate. Yeah, that's great. Your APIs only allow you to make calls on the database once every 5 hours. And there's a ton of data you won't let me have access to. You won't let me write into your system. Like, yeah, you can call it an open API all day long, but that doesn't, the actual experience of it is not what you're implying with that word. And so we don't want to create that same experience.
Well, not necessarily contrarian, but a little bit. I love that answer, though. I don't have the cheer or applaud, function at the switchboard anymore because I had to go to my laptop. But I would be giving you a round of applause. I
Thanks.
think that is so awesome. We could use more entrepreneurs, those in the space, just kind of acknowledging everything that you did. So fantastic kind of explanation for me, and yeah, just love the candor.
Thanks.
David, I got to assume the same. I don't think we've heard it quite put that way, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I did not notice that AI wasn't on their homepage, but I did notice the Yardi Survivor, uh, marketing, which is what originally had me really interested. I was like, okay, looks like a normal property management. What? Oh, wait a minute, Yardi Survivor, you got my attention.
Yeah.
So I love that angle that you guys are taking, Kerri.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's true.
Well, we've taken up a lot of your time, but is there anything else that you wanted to hit with this before we let you go?
No, I don't think so. This has been a great conversation and I appreciate it. And I would love to front stab you guys, but I feel like I don't need to. I feel like Reed did it all by himself with his
Yeah.
technical malfunctions. So I don't think I need to call anything out.
It would not be the first time that Regis front stabbed himself.
Yeah, I have a knack for that.
Well, Kerri, if people want to learn more about you or Fortress, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, so obviously on LinkedIn, I have a profile there. Please feel free to reach out. We also have fortresstech.io, where you can actually fill out a contact form. And of course, my team will reach out. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kerri.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.